This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault, and today's episode is presented by Aesthetic Magazine. This is another episode of our Remake series, and unlike our previous episodes where we're looking at an original film and a remake and seeing how they're similar and different when telling the same story, so in the past we've done stuff like the recent Netflix Rebecca and the Alfred Hitchcock Rebecca. That was the most recent one. We're tackling a bit of a unique situation here, where we're going to look at Orson Welles' famous debut feature, Citizen Kane, with the new David Fincher release, Mank, which is a behind-the-scenes making of writing movie. So this is a little bit different. It's not going to follow the same trend. And because of that, I feel like I need to bring on some new guests, some exciting guests. Now, if you listen to the show, you probably heard me talk about them before. I've been a guest on their show twice, but joining me for the first time is Sam Blakeley and Hugh Dempsey from Please Watch This, coming all the way from across the Atlantic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
A pleasure to be here, Dakota.
Hello there. Call blimey, all the way.
Governor.
So, like I mentioned, I was previously on your show. I was on a recent episode where we talked about the Richard Linklater film Before Sunrise, and then the first time, way back in the summer, you had me on to discuss the Wes Anderson movie, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And so I guess the way that works is, every two appearances I have on your show, you get one on mine because there's two of you, and that counts as two.
That's good. I thought it was going to be about quality of show or something like that, but I prefer the quantitative numbers game.
But I am excited. So this is an interesting one. I tried to my original goal with the Make Remakes was I wanted to approach two movies I hadn't seen at all, so that way I can kind of go in fresh and be able to compare them. And because I would often find you've seen one movie and you go watch a remake of it or whatever, and you're like, oh, this isn't what the original was. I prefer the original. It doesn't matter whatever one you see first. Whatever was the first one you see, that's the one you usually have a stronger attachment to. And so that's why I try to do it that way. But I'm finding when I'm trying to do these newer ones, it doesn't work out. Like, I'd seen the original Rebecca a bunch of times, so I brought on a guest who had never seen the original Rebecca. And that's sort of why I approached you guys with Citizen Kane. Now, Sam, you had told me you had seen bits and pieces of it, and Hugh, I believe you had not seen this at all. So this was a first-time full watch for both of you, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And it would be the ideal content for our show, because our show is all about filling in gaps that we haven't, classic films you haven't seen, and what film is more classic than Citizen Kane, really. It's right up there with any other classic film you can care to mention. And yet,
that you're not going to mention.
But neither of us had seen it all the way through before, so yeah, absolutely, it was a really good opportunity to watch it.
It isn't enough to tell us what a man did. You've got to tell us who he was.
So I guess then before we kind of really get into it, I'd love to kind of maybe get just your first reactions of it. We don't really have to break the movie down, but did this movie live up to the hype? Was it overrated? Was it boring? I know some people have trouble going back to it because they've just heard so much about it that it never really lives up to the hype. I guess, Hugh, let's start with you. Your sort of first impression thoughts of it.
Oh, I thought it was amazing. Yeah, I was absolutely bowled over by how good it was. I was surprised, actually, at just how good it was. I even said to Sam that I was annoyed that I was 32 years old and I hadn't seen this film yet. I should have seen this when I was 18 or 19 or something. Should have seen it donkeys years ago.
And what about you, Sam?
I had a really mixed feeling about it. I didn't love it, actually. I kind of really appreciated just how groundbreaking it is, and you can tell it from a modern eye, because if you see in any other black and white film, so anything pre, the 90s, a lot of those techniques that he's using are so, they do stand out. But I think the problem for me was just that I kind of admired all that, but I just didn't really feel any strong emotions watching it, and honestly fell asleep quite a lot during it, and I had to keep rewinding a couple minutes, and then I watched it again the next day and enjoyed it a lot more when I didn't, when I watched it in one chunk without falling asleep at all. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, but I just didn't love it.
Interesting. Yeah, I've definitely heard the idea that it's a little bit more enjoyable to watch on a second viewing. It's not like it's a super complicated film plot wise, but I think when you don't have to worry about, oh, who is this character, what's their relation to what is the story trying to tell, especially when you kind of maybe look at it a little bit as everyone's a little bit of an unreliable narrator.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
you can kind of just like enjoy who the characters are, because it really is much more of a character piece than it is sort of a plot heavy movie, because at the end of the day, a whole bunch of stuff is pretty unresolved. It's more about just learning who these people were.
Yeah, I think so, and it is for that reason, as you say, it's one to rewatch, because I think it's very possible I'm quite simple. And often I won't fully appreciate a film for its greatness, the first time I watch it, and sometimes it takes months or years later for me to rewatch it and go, what was I thinking the first time? Why didn't I absolutely adore it?
I mean, I've been saying it's simple for years, Sam.
Yeah, exactly, and here it is, finally, empirical evidence.
In black and white.
But a film like There Will Be Blood, I remember enjoying it the first time, and then a couple of years later I rewatched it and thought, why didn't I totally love this film immediately? And it's kind of, a similar kind of film. It's a character portrait of a successful person over the course of many years. And maybe that's what it is. It's quite dark, it's quite like deep themes and stuff that a simple man like me doesn't get the first time.
I'm surprised you didn't like it, to be honest.
Not enough explosions.
I thought you were really going to. I thought you were really going to enjoy it, to be frank.
Yeah, so did I.
I mean, Orson Welles is he's magnetic. He's the definition of a film star, isn't he?
I think I'd only seen him in Third Man before, and he, half the film he's been talked about, but he doesn't show up. And we talked about this actually when you were on the show, Dakota. And he's on screen, and you go, okay, yeah, I get it now. That is a movie star.
He's like the dictionary definition, isn't he? I was trying to think, and I was asking both, like, can you think of other actors or actresses who kind of fall into that sort of, they're so magnetic on screen, their screen presence is just magnetic, because in this film you kind of see him, don't you, like in the newsreel at the beginning, and they have like little snippets from him here and there, and you see like an interview that he gives when he's coming from off the boat, but then you don't really get to see an actual part. It's only maybe like 10, 15, 20 minutes in until he's in the newsroom, and that's when you first kind of really see the character actually interact with people normally.
I think a young Brando has that.
Yeah, Brando was the first person I thought of.
But
actually,
it helps that Brando is so hot. He is so stunningly good looking. And Orson Welles is really handsome, but in an odd-looking way.
He looks like a bulldog.
yeah, very jowly, even when he's got a jawline.
He could have played a young Winston Churchill, couldn't he?
The guy from the American Dad.
He could have played a cartoon character. Yes, indeed. Brando first came to mind when I thought, like, when you think of like Apocalypse Now and all those, like, he's barely in the film, is he? But he's always referred to, and then when he comes in, he makes a big impact.
Yeah, it's about 7 hours before he arrives. He's gone after 3 minutes, and you go, "Oh yeah, that's that Brando film."
Yeah, Brando's a good example.
Any other completely magnetic actors for you, Dakota?
It's a little bit tough, because like he definitely has this weird charm to him where you don't quite trust him. Whereas you look at you sort of run through your list of who you think is a magnetic actor, and it's usually because they're charming in a positive way.
Yeah.
Whereas has a bit of an off-putting charm, which really works for a character like Charles Foster Kane, where you never really can tell exactly what his allegiances are and where he sort of is going one way or another. Is he going to stab you in the back, or is he going to be the best friend you've ever had, or maybe both at the same time?
I mean, you can have actors who are very charming and on screen, but you don't trust them in real life. Look at Tom Cruise.
Yeah, exactly.
He's maybe another one I could put in that list. These uber charismatic actors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
It's interesting as well, you say about you don't know whether you can trust him, because he's really that sort of person who, and I'm sure we'll get into all the controversy and stories about his authorship and his how honest the person he was. Those people who can schmooze and tell a story, and you listen to it and you're entertained by it, but you only half believe it, because these people live to mythologize themselves. There's the physicist Richard Feynman, who's a bit like that. He tells these great stories and it's so interesting, but then you hear from other people, well, it didn't really happen like that, and he was so obsessed with mythologizing his own life and really refining these stories. And Hugh, you mentioned Winston Churchill. Have either of you seen Orson Welles schmoozing about Winston Churchill and telling a story about Winston Churchill?
No.
It's really wonderful. I won't relay the whole thing. On YouTube, if you look for Orson Welles schmoozes Winston Churchill, schmoozes about Winston Churchill, it just tells a great story about kind of his friendship with Winston Churchill. I'd highly recommend.
With Churchill, there's obviously the great line that he said, "History will favour me very well because I shall write them." That's something he said. And yeah, he won a Nobel Prize in literature for I think his autobiography or something. I could be wrong there, but he definitely won one. That's what's on the £5 note, not Prime Minister and war leader. Nobel Prize laureate, which I always think is really funny. Bit weird rewriting of history.
Now speaking of Citizen Kane, I kind of want to talk a little bit about his character Charles Foster Kane. And I kind of alluded to earlier where you don't know if he's going to stab you in the back or be your best friend sort of thing. How do you sort of look at his character? Because at the end of the day, you kind of watch him. And there's quite a few similarities I would see with some of the the populist politicians going on in the world right now, whether it's it's someone like Trump or Boris Johnson or something like that. But at the same time, he also has these ideals of making sure that the poor person never goes hungry and all this sort of stuff, which does not align with these sort of conservative populism politics at all. But it definitely sort of see a template for these larger than life politicians where you can't really trust what they're saying and what their actions will actually be.
Yeah, I think my favourite, more recent example is Tommy Carcetti in The Wire. I don't know if you're a fan of The Wire. Dakota.
Yes.
And he's someone whose ideals you believe in, and he seems like this ambitious, idealistic young man, but then that he's trying to cheat on his wife, and you suspect that really it's just about actually just getting it to become the mayor so he can eventually become president or something like that. You see him behind the curtain, and he seems to be talking idealistically with his campaign staff, but you kind of don't trust him all the way.
Yeah, so that was something interesting that I really sort of picked up on this watch, where I found myself really not believing what he was saying. Because, the one thing that a lot of politicians don't really understand is this idea of the working class struggle. And then the ones that do sort of come up with that, they eventually have it sort of beaten out of them by the system, basically, the very Tommy Carcetti sort of way. Yeah. I could see if Kane, who runs for governor, ends up losing. If he wins, I could see by the time the second term rolls around that he's up for re-election, he completely abandons all principles he has because, we watch it with his newspaper. It starts out very earnestly intentioned of wanting to report real stories that the rest of the media is ignoring. And then he, essentially just turns into a version of The Sun where it's a gossip rag. Yeah,
and like pretty quickly as well. It's not like, it's not like the old man becomes the old Rupert Murdoch. He's a pretty young version of Rupert Murdoch being awful and Rupert Murdoch-y from the very early. That's almost a template for Rupert Murdoch's career in some ways.
For me, I think it's just a film, or he's a character that the film portrays a character that you see the corruption of his idealistic ways.
Do you think he's idealistic to start with, or do you think that's more of the image?
I almost feel like he's idealistic to fight back against his guardian too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, he's not too happy, is he? But yeah, he just kind of gets slowly corrupted by idealism, really, doesn't he? And him trying to be one thing, but ultimately he's not able to be this thing that he thinks he is, and compromises, I guess.
Well, because he's so arrogant about, I can afford to lose $1 million a year for the next 60 years, and then actually it doesn't, it can run out, and you do have to rebuild.
Yeah, he's. Yeah, because that's like that scene, isn't he, when he's signing over some stuff, isn't he? With, is it Bernstein?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, with his guardian, yeah.
Yeah.
It almost reminds you of, like, every once in a while you'll see, like, a tweet or something about, like, how if, starting in the year zero, you made $5,000 a day, up until today, you'd still have less money than Jeff Bezos has made in one day or something like that. Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's an element of Wolf of Wall Street-ness about this, and how charming he is to crowds. I found it odd, actually, just how raucous the laughter was at every single thing he said when he was around his kind of newspaper buddies and those kind, when he's sort of schmoozing at those kind of parties. every line. You know, he talks about they've been building statues for 2,000 years. I've only been buying for 5. It's a good line, but then he follows it up with something much less interesting, and they all fall apart laughing even further.
I quite liked the character at the start of the film. You know, I thought he was, I liked his idealism. I liked his, you see him doing work with like antitrust stuff, trying to break that up, which was something that was big at the big turn of the last century. Maybe not so much his advocacy for the Spanish War, but that's just part of the film, isn't it? That's sort of his patriotism comes through. Like you said, this film was originally titled The American rather than Citizen Kane, which I think Citizen Kane is a much better title personally.
Now, moving over a little bit to talk about Mank, which is David Fincher's new movie that is about the writing of it and how it sort of purports that Herman Mankiewicz was, one of the key figures behind the film's success. How did that work as a movie for you? Because I look at it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the sort of fight between who is the actual author of this movie and how much did each of these two people have control over the narrative and everything. And I feel like this sort of swings in the complete opposite direction of whatever the mythology behind Orson Welles is, in that Herman Mankiewicz was the true author and architect of this movie. And so I liked the movie, but at the same time, I feel like it didn't allow for any sort of middle ground or ambiguity.
Yeah, and it is the story of it. And funnily enough, we recently in our show did the film Anonymous, which is kind of suggesting that Shakespeare wasn't the author of Shakespeare, but it's not saying, oh, maybe this, maybe that. It's just saying definitely he wasn't. And you're right, this film is 100% saying Orson Welles is a credit-taking psychopathic,
limelight stealing,
yeah. And it's a funny one where somebody is so genuinely talented because you see him on screen. The acting is so good, and he directed it. But yeah, the writership, it's an odd one. I genuinely didn't know anything about the story as well, which was quite a nice. Even having seen Citizen Kane, I didn't really know what Mank was about until I watched it, and it was at least just an interesting bit of gossip drama, really, rather than changing my opinion on the film.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to that characters that Citizen Kane is sort of loosely based around are real people. So there's always going to be a story behind the story, if that makes sense. Because what was the inspiration for what Citizen Kane was about, and why did Mankiewicz come to believe these things about the people he was portraying? And like the film goes to great lengths to go, I think it's the female lead in it. He's like, I'm trying, this is what people. She's like, people are saying, people think it's her, and is it Bette
Rita Alexander?
No, is it Bette Davis?
Marion Davis.
Marion Davis, thank you.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah, Amanda Seyfried's character. They're like, oh well, they'll say that it's her, and he's basically having to say, no, it's not her. It's what people think of her, or what people think she's like, or behaves and things like this. So I thought that was quite interesting.
It'd be interesting because obviously to a current audience, we don't make those links when we see Citizen Kane unless you've heard these characters before. They're not as famous through time as a Rockefeller, or I can't think of many other equivalents.
Like J.P. Morgan or Andrew Carnegie or somebody like that. Yeah. Like media barons. Yeah, I don't really know any American media barons, say from like other than like the late 20th century, like your Ted Turners and people like that. Do you know any?
I think that they didn't do also a good enough job of really painting a picture of who William Randolph Hearst is. Yeah. So that's the character that Kane is based on. Yeah. And I was really excited to see what they would do with that. And Charles Dance is a terrific actor who most people will probably recognize from Game of Thrones in recent years. But he's actually in David Fincher's first movie, Alien 3.
Was he?
So it was a nice little throwback to that.
Yeah, he plays
if you listened to the last episode, we talked about him there.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
he
you'll
does.
find he's most famous for his role in Last Action Hero.
Yeah, he's got that glass eye.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Have you not seen it?
Love that film. Love
Classic.
that.
No.
It's really good. Yeah.
We'll get you on for that. Something, yeah. Really, really underrated classic.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah, he does what Donald Trump says he was going to do, or Donald Trump says he could do. Yeah, I've just shot a man, and he's waiting for the police to come. He's like waiting with his like he gets his watch out to see how long it takes the police to respond, and they don't come.
He's on screen in Mank for so little time. You're right, Dakota. It was disappointing because you don't see much of Wells and you don't see much of the Kane.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that the one of the points that both films make is, oh well, how can you sum up a man's life in 2 hours? Mank says that very much himself, and maybe that, yeah, the portrayal of why Mank doesn't like him doesn't really come across, other than that he just thinks he's a bit superficial, and that he basically rigged an election for was it for the Senate seat or so? Which election were they even running for? Was it for the Senate or for that?
Is it a governor?
For governor?
Yeah, that wasn't completely clear, but it was up against Upton Sinclair, who is the the famous muckraking journalist who wrote the book Oil, which turned into There Will Be Blood. And he also wrote The Jungle, which was single-handedly responsible for
the Amazon jungle,
reforming meat protocols in the U.S. because he would writing about how slaughterhouses were so disgustingly dirty and how like people's literal human bodies were like also being mixed in with the meat accidentally because an employee would like fall into a meat grinder and they'd be like, whoops, oh well.
All counts.
And FDR was so appalled by this that he basically created the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, if I'm remembering correctly. But it was like to basically regulate meat in the US because they had no regulations at all.
A small observation that the guy who played that gentleman you're on about, whose name I've completely forgotten, is played by Bill Nye the Science Guy in this film. He's on screen for like a second or something.
Was it?
Yeah. I saw a YouTube video before I came to record, and
that's great.
I did not realize that.
I didn't see that at all.
No, neither did I. I didn't even...
Yeah, because you like never really see his face. You just kind of see him from the side or from behind.
An interesting cameo. I love those, like when David Beckham was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. for about 3 frames and that sort of thing. I love those weird cameos.
There's a weird one at the minute in that Star Trek Discovery show. Is David Cronenberg's in it. He just acts in it as one of these like...
Man.
Yeah, just really randomly.
Yeah, I saw that today. I saw that on Twitter where he was asked about why he was on. He said, I don't know, I'm cheap and I live in Toronto.
Dakota, you live in Toronto. Are you cheap or are you quite expensive? you could
I'm
very cheap. You can have me in your movie at a very low cost.
You'll be in any Star Trek.
In the low 5 figures.
Yes.
Yeah, people hate that. Star Trek fans hate that show, that Star Trek Discovery. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. That's a different podcast. I think it's all right.
Now, I feel like at this point we can maybe sort of connect the two movies because, despite the fact that it's Mank is about the writing of Citizen Kane, that doesn't really connect it for this episode. And I think the real connective tissue for this is this legacy of Pauline Kael, who wrote this very famous New York Times essay called Raising Kane, and sort of really built the mythology behind what was going on behind the scenes, who is the real writer of the movie, and all this sort of stuff. Now, I didn't have time to read the actual original essay because it's a very long one. It's a part of a book now. But
Kane.
there is, numerous rebuttals out there. And so it was just very fascinating to sort of look at that and see how Mank is basically a direct rebuttal to this Pauline Kael essay and the way that the world sort of views Citizen Kane as a whole. Now, does having that sort of third piece of the puzzle really help connect the two for you guys?
Yeah, I think so, and especially knowing that there's still a contentious debate out there, and how people, like you say, have had a rebuttal to that Kael essay and said, well, she was just, sort of following her biases as well. Other people were actually accusing her of stealing ideas from other people and then claiming them as her own, which is exactly what she was accusing Orson Welles of. It adds to the mystery of the film. It's not just a straightforward making of documentary. It does make you question not only the author's the characters as authors, but also the authors of the film as authors. So there's like inception of unreliable authorship. Yeah,
it's just a case. It's just a case of revisionism, really, isn't it? Basically, it's where somebody goes, "Oh, well, I have the evidence that this person didn't do all that they say they did, and tried to take something away," and then everyone's gone, "Well, actually, no, this is how it happened, and you're wrong." I don't know. Did she have like an axe to grind against Orson Welles? She doesn't seem to like him very much. She seems to think he's some sort of
It definitely sort of seems
sociopath.
that way. I haven't read a ton of Pauline Kael, but every time I do read it, she comes from an era where film criticism, was really sort of expanding. You get like the Cahiers du Cinema guys with Truffaut and over in France and stuff like that. And then you also have Kael in America. And it seems like a lot of her work was just very antagonistic a lot of the time. And so I've never really been able to get into her writing. Nothing like Roger Ebert, who I know you guys, try to read his reviews as much as possible on your show.
I mean, if you want, I'll lend you the sound bite so you can play the little jingle we do here. So we can have it added into your show.
But you read Roger Ebert and there's just so much passion behind it. Even the movies he doesn't like, he still will find something positive to say about the filmmakers or the ideas that they're trying to present in a way that like really speaks to film lovers of like, this is why I watch movies, not just because I want to love something, but because I want to appreciate the art behind it. And he does that, good or bad. And Pauline Kael, a lot of her stuff just really does seem like an axe to grind, where even if she likes it, it's because she has to prove a point to someone else. And if she doesn't like it, it's because this person messed up and they're wrong and they're bad. And so it's just like, I've never really been able to get into her.
I find criticism does that to people. If someone's a critic or a commenter, or they've got their own little op-ed thing, they tend to become so cynical because their opinion has been valued and literally they've given money for their opinion. So their cynical opinions even more so, and it is this weird psychological thing that happens. But yeah, with Roger Ebert, I mean, he was one of the few critics when Star Wars came out that just wholeheartedly loved it. And there's great, debates that he had, televised debates with more snooty critics who were kind of being too grown up about it. And he's like, no, this is a wonderful film to enjoy for the sake of it.
Well, he obviously worked with Gene Siskel, didn't he? He was a lot more cynical, one would say, than Roger. Roger Ebert's basically like a warm little teddy bear going, "Oh, this film was wonderful," and Siskel's like, "I hated it," and he's like, "You're wrong. I'll tell you why you're wrong." He's more, newsman sort of reporting the talkies, But yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I mean, what did you guys actually think of Mank as a film, just on its own? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you think it was a good film? Did you, you've already said that you don't think the portrayal of William Hurst is very good, but what did you actually think of the film itself from start to finish? I mean, don't go, minute one, I was intrigued. That's...
As a lover of classic cinema and even, the making of movies and that's whole behind the scenes sort of genre, I enjoyed that aspect quite a bit. This, what is Hollywood magic? It's, something on a sound stage where you've got a woman pretending to scream while she's standing there smoking a cigarette behind the camera. I love that sort of stuff. And, all the name dropping that they did throughout it, I really love that. And trying to pick up little clues of who these people were supposed to be and what sort of careers they go on to have. I love all that sort of stuff. And the way it was shot and edited, it definitely had a real Citizen Kane vibe. So I appreciated that Fincher was trying to be as in sync with what his inspiration was as possible. So I liked all that. But at the same time, I just feel like so much of this was missing. I like the fact that Orson Welles wasn't a big character in the story. Yeah, because he already is this sort of larger than life character. We don't need him in every scene. We get these fuzzy images of him and we get to hear him yelling on the phone. That works great for me. I love that.
The guy who played him was really good, wasn't he? I thought he was spot on with the voice.
But if he's on screen for an hour, Orson Welles is so recognizable that you just start to see the flaws in the impression, really, don't you?
Yeah. I love the first time we see him, we get this very fuzzy image and you see the famous cape that he's wearing. That there's, I can't remember where there's definitely some film stills or promotional pictures where he's wearing this like large cape thing with the big black hat, and it's so iconic looking, and I'm glad that they used that as one of his costumes.
People don't get to wear capes anymore, do we? You know, it's not a fashion.
No, we should bring it back.
The over-the-shoulder chain cape.
Yeah, overall though, you know, I feel like I'm pretty mixed about this movie. I think Gary Oldman did a pretty good job, but I think the issue relies more on the actual scripting of the movie, where I feel like there's too much missing. I think Amanda Seyfried was the real star of this movie. She was so fantastic as Marion Davies, where you really sort of, your heart breaks for her, how she's kind of caught between these two worlds. She's not really, you know, this millionaire heiress woman. She just happens to be in love with a guy that is this huge industrialist, and she's, you know, kind of stuck in the middle where she's trying to be a regular person, but she's not. She can't be.
And she does, I think, probably her best acting in the film is probably during one of the climactic scenes at the, I don't know what, it's like a sort of dinner party thing where you know, where Mank gets all drunk and thrown up and everything, where I don't even know if she says a word in the whole scene, but she steals focus a lot of the time just to do great eye acting, really. And you get to read so much about
they're so big
of that character. Well, I know, yeah, they cover the screen, don't they?
Like stalks, aren't they?
And I think, I'll tell you what, Dakota, I think something you really like about this film is you're a big fan of noir, if I remember correctly. Is that right? I think you've said that before. Yep. It's so noir-y, and I thought I was playing L.A. Noire sometimes. You know, have either of you
I like how that's your reference. It's so noir. It was like I was playing a game from 2008
called L.A. Noire. And it's about like Hollywood a lot of the time, and the same cars, it's the same like empty lots where they're building some houses, and there's a big sign of Happy Family.
Not like it reminded me of like, you know, The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon.
No.
Casablanca or something.
I'm low culture, Hugh. You know this.
It was. It reminds me of a
video game based on those.
2 years ago.
Really good game.
I hear they remastered it recently.
Yeah, really good game.
I am glad you did bring up the noir thing, because that was another thing I forgot about Citizen Kane, is that movie, a lot of the time the characters are literally standing in complete darkness where like you can't see them. Like you get the typical noir shot where they've got like the light being reflected just on their eyes, and that's a very classic noir imagery. But this sort of feels like a little bit pre-noir, where they're sort of setting the template of people being in shadows, and you know, that probably has to do with how we perceive the characters. If they're in the dark, are they telling us the truth? That sort of thing. When they come to the light, what can we really believe? Is that their public versus private personas? So I like that, you know, they played with that in both of the movies.
And it's a great era for blocking, because you just have men in rooms with slatted windows, and you know, you just see the light coming through, and yet you've got to deal with, okay, what's the power dynamic in this scene at the moment? Well, he's going to be sat on the desk over him then in that case, but then when he gets the other upper hand, he's going to be then sat down in his chair, and the other person's going to be looming over him. And noir is a lot of that, isn't it? You know, it's a detective going in and getting the upper hand and leaving all cool, and the camera follows them as they swagger out and all this sort of stuff. And Mank really captured that. Well. Quick talking, lots of dames and cigarettes and rap games or whatever.
Yeah, throat cancer. I noticed in Mank that they used the deep focus technique that they used in Citizen Kane. I thought that might happen, to be fair. That they would use that technique, yeah. But
what other thoughts did you have on the movie then, Hugh?
But Hugh's having some technical issues. I'll take over from there. I mean, for me, it's a very long film. It's 2 hours 15, which in itself is not a negative. But it was really interesting how they managed to reflect a lot of the techniques used in Citizen Kane from a structural point of view, and then they're very meta about it. You know, it jumps around too much, and it's just a lot of vignettes of talkies and all this sort of stuff. And then Mank does that very knowingly. And I quite like that when they have a flashback, they have the screenplay text on the screen saying, you know, flashback 34. And I quite like that they tried to mimic that, because it actually made me enjoy Citizen Kane more, because I got to see that those things were intentional mechanisms as opposed to flaws in storytelling and structure.
Right, okay. I mean, like, as I said, for me, it was okay, but I didn't love it. I didn't think... It doesn't really add anything for me to the mythos that is Citizen Kane. Do you know what I mean? It was more like... I feel like Fincher had his father wrote the screenplay, didn't he? Like 20 years ago or something.
He did quite a while ago too.
Yeah, it was like 99 or something. So it felt like more of a passion project for him to do this film, and because it's David Fincher and Citizen Kane, he was able to get all these amazing actors and actresses on board. But I just was kind of left. I kind of feel Gary Oldman was a bit too old for the role. Like, I know that Mank was a bit, he was an alcoholic, he probably wasn't in the best of shape, but there's a bit where he goes, "Oh, I'm 42. And it's like, you're not, well, you're not. First of all, you're not 42.
You're an old man. You're quite literally a Gary Old man.
Yeah, he's literally 20 years older than the character he's meant to be playing. And I felt like, I think they missed, like, I love Gary Oldman, but I think he was the wrong person for this film. I think they should have gone with somebody who was about the age of the character. Because then when you go...
Anyone in particular?
Not off the top of my head, no. But it was just... Because there was flashing back even further. Like, you just don't buy that he's 32 or whatever. Or in his mid-30s in, like, 1934 and 1930 and all this. You just sit there going, he's clearly, like... At least 50, yeah. In his mid-50s at least. And I suppose that you could say, oh, well, the critic in me would go, well, actually, they're paralleling Citizen Kane by having the actor portray different ages of a role that he's not actually at. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but it's just, actors of this caliber do these kind of things all the time, don't they? And I suppose if you see photos of Mank, and there's a photo of him and Orson Welles, and he looks older maybe than what he is, but he doesn't look a man in his early 60s, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, 40-year-olds in 1930s didn't look 40 now, do they?
No. A lot less lycra. Did either of you think that, or is that just me being pernickety?
No, I understand what you're saying. It's tough because, Mankiewicz did have some hard miles on him.
Yeah, tough paper round.
And Gary Oldman isn't, your traditional Hollywood attractive leading man. So I sort of appreciate that they sort of kept with that a little bit. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I like Gary Oldman. I don't think his performance was the issue. I think more of it was just the script more than anything.
You were saying that you thought Amanda Seyfried was the best thing in this. I thought Lily Collins was the best thing in this film, acting wise. Yeah, like I hadn't really seen her in that much and didn't really rate her that highly. But then, yeah, I thought she was probably the best. She's like kind of the heart of the film, I guess, because when she finds out that he drank the, I don't know, is it like sleeping? What is it that he drinks? Is it like a sleeping aid or something? He drinks the whole bottle.
Yeah, that wasn't completely clear of what exactly he was drinking, but
whatever
it was, you shouldn't have drank the whole bottle.
Yeah, and then he gets the drink in, and then she's the one who finds out about him moving the German villagers to America to save them from the Nazis. So yeah, it's like there's stuff like that that's quite interesting. It's as I said, I feel like this was something that David Fincher wanted to do because his dad had written the screenplay. I could quite have happily watched Citizen Kane and never watched this film. It doesn't add anything extra for me. And I think the fact that the controversy with Kael sort of has been kind of debunked, she was wrong, and that's the end of it. You can go back and there's people who have... Rita, what was her name? Lily Collins played in this film.
Rita Alexander, is it? Yeah.
Sorry, not her. Orson Welles' secretary at the time. She said, well, I was doing writing. I was, Orson Welles was dictating stuff to me and I was writing stuff down. I was typing stuff up. So what the hell was I doing all that time? Do you know what I mean? What was I writing?
Yeah. It's definitely a one-sided take, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we all watched the same little video essay, and it basically said, well, Orson Welles wrote his version of the script, Mank wrote his version, and he kept what he liked from Mank's version and the bits that he liked from his own, and kind of hybridized, easy for me to say, the two, which I imagine, yeah, sounds about right, doesn't it?
I would sort of look at it, basing on everything that we know, I think Mankiewicz really brought who this, William Randolph Hearst character is, and the sort of overarching, idea of the character that he brings. And then Orson Welles sort of, invented the scenes for him to play in.
Yeah.
And so you can have the two of them where they're both the authors of this. And that's the thing that I think, I find so silly to even wonder why there's this controversy, because you look at a lot of movies, a Hollywood blockbuster, we usually have anywhere from like 7 to 8 people that we know are working on it, and that doesn't even include people that do uncredited script doctoring. But almost every single movie, unless it's like someone very much like a Quentin Tarantino, where like I write everything I do, every single word is all me, nothing else, or the Coen brothers, where they're very super specific about how their characters speak. Almost every movie usually will incorporate 2 people as a writer, so it's not a shock at all that you have someone who's maybe more in charge of the characters and someone that's more in charge of the story. Like, yeah. There should be no controversy at all.
But I think it's maybe the antagonism between them and the attempts from one to block out the other that does creates the drama in the story about it, doesn't it?
Strange that he even agreed to like not have his name credited in the first place, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, maybe just an element of desperation.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get paid for this job. I don't realise it's going to be the best thing I've ever made.
Yeah, and then once he's written it and read it, he was like, "Oh, this is my best work, so I want credit for this and deserve credit for it." And yeah, him and Wells have that little showdown where Wells throws something and breaks it across the room, and he goes, "Oh, I'm going to put this in the movie." Oh, what are the chances? Eh? Because no one's ever reacted badly to bad news before.
to the film's great credit, there are two big things that it had to dramatise that could be really boring. One of them is writing, which a lot of films have tried to dramatise, and it rarely looks good, and it's really interesting.
I mean, if it's not set in a cabin in the middle of winter with the threat of somebody going to hobble you, then what are you even doing?
What's the point? Yeah. And,
what is the point?
And the other one is, kind of basically contract dispute. Not very exciting, but actually, litigation. Yeah. But, I thought they did a really good job, and I didn't love the film, but again, I think there were just some elements that put me off. But I think there's some great lines in it, and there's some great bits, and I do think Gary Oldman was excellent.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think he was too old to play the part, but he is good in it.
Yeah, and he's very charming, and he's believable as a loose cannon who you actually want to be on the same side of.
Yeah, and he's strict. He's got his principles, hasn't he? Yeah. Even when it costs him $24,000 sorry, which in today's money is like, I don't know, like 100,000 or something.
Oh, at least, yeah.
What would it be in Canadian dollars? Do they even go up to that number in Canadian dollars?
How many moose is that?
You guys are so funny.
It's 6 elks, 4 moose, and a reindeer. It's a lot.
One interesting thing that I feel like hasn't been approached at all, I don't know how true this is, but I read somewhere that the original fight sort of stemmed from the fact that in Orson Welles' contract with RKO, it dictated that he had to write and direct the movie. And so that's why he was adamant that his name appeared as written by, and he was worried that if Mankovic's name was on there either solely or a joint credit, that RKO would not pay him his salary because his salary was based on doing both jobs, not just one.
Yeah.
So this is something that I don't really know the validity of it. I've read it before, and so I haven't seen any proof of contracts or something like that, or in a memo that's what Wells's concern was. But I would be interested to see how true that is.
It's less dramatic. That's a less dramatic motivation for him rather than being a sort of monster. And there's an element of let's print the legend.
It's a more human reason, isn't it?
It is,
because he's concerned. He's still young, and he's just concerned about money, really, and he wants to fulfill his contractual obligations.
Why was he such a big Billy Big Bollocks? He was 24, and what did he have on these studios that he had so much control and power and money? Was it just because he was so charming and convincing? What had he done before this? Was he a great actor in other stuff?
Well, he ran his group called the Mercury Players, and they would do theater productions, but they also did radio dramas. Now, I know none of us remember this because we're way too young, but radio dramas were the biggest thing before movies.
Was the War of
people
the Worlds
were worried about that they would kill the
this?
industry.
Yeah, that was in 1939.
That was in the 30s. Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, so he did the very famous radio play of War of the World, where people thought Martians were actually attacking Earth or whatever it was, because he made it seem as realistic as possible, and people tuning in, they would do these like little update bulletins of this is what's happening in the world, and people were terrified that the Earth was actually under attack. Wonderful. And that gained him a ton of infamy.
Do you know my favourite fact about that is the fact that they advertised it as a radio play, or and they said, this is a radio play, we're doing War of the Worlds, and it was just the people who hadn't heard the advertising.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's that's like a myth. They advertised it. Yeah, and they were like, no, a new play from.
But he was definitely in a unique position where, going into Hollywood as a first-time filmmaker, he was given carte blanche. He didn't have to get any sort of approval for what type of movie he wanted to. They gave him a budget, but that's about it, and full creative control, where the studio couldn't say how it was going to be edited or anything like that. And that was completely unheard of then, and it's completely unheard of now. No studio will ever do that sort of deal with a first-time filmmaker.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, imagine that you make that as your first film. Like, how can you?
Well, what am I going to make next? This is just up and up from here. It's not going to be known as my best ever. Surely I'm going to get that.
I mean, you've peaked at 27 minutes.
But this is interesting that when you see him in interviews, you can sort of believe that he would be able to charm and cajole and negotiate his way into a situation like that, as well as having, as you said, Dakota, some success on the radio before that.
I think it was just that he was in a unique position because of, say, like I think it says at the beginning of Mank that RKO were struggling financially as well, so they were willing to give a lot of money to a young and up and coming director. But yeah, to get complete control is rare, isn't it? I think only people like George Lucas.
Every once in a while they'll be like, every once in a while you'll hear the story of a hot theater director with their first movie. I think of someone like Sam Mendes, who was a huge theater director over in England, and his first picture was American Beauty, which ended up winning Best Picture, which, very few first-time filmmakers are able to do something like that.
I mean, you look at Steve McQueen, the director who made 12 Years a Slave. Yeah. He wasn't really a filmmaker. He was an artist, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe he was he did a few different things. He was a theater director, but he also was doing visual arts and things like that.
Yeah, he won the Turner Prize, I think, in '99.
But yeah, so it's definitely very interesting to sort of look at all that and sort of see how it all connects. And a big sort of criticism I feel like that Pauline Kael was trying to level was destroying the idea of the auteur theory, which is that a single person is responsible for the creation of a film. And it's something that, while I sort of disagree with the idea of one person is, intrinsically responsible for a movie, at the same time, you can look around of directors who have made, 5, 10, 15 movies and just see how much of an impression a single person can really have. I mentioned Quentin Tarantino earlier. If you removed his name from his movie, you'd definitely be able to tell what a Tarantino movie is, despite the fact that he's got, an army of people behind him that are there to make sure that they can execute the vision. But is he not an auteur?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you go, oh, this is a Quentin Tarantino film, and then you watch the credits and you go, there's 300 names in that list. but certainly to have that singular vision, and then you find out things like, oh, well, so and so's used the same cinematographer a single time. So is it a Coen Brothers film, or is it a Roger Deakins and Coen Brothers film, or Tim Burton? I can't remember the name of the guy who he mostly works with. Tim Burton has that sort of visual style, and then maybe that's just his.
I mean, Tim Burton's visual style is so strong that I, for years, thought that the Nightmare Before Christmas was a Tim Burton directed film.
I would say Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, because the music so much sets the tone for a Burton movie.
Massively. And I think I've recently watched Addams Family, which stands up as a genuinely great film, by the way. I don't know if any of you have seen that in the last 10 years.
I rewatched it recently for Halloween.
Exactly. Yeah, that was right. And I don't know if Danny Elfman did the music, but it is so Danny Elfman that it doesn't matter that it's not him. So I think with Tenet, it wasn't Hans Zimmer, but it might as well have been. It was Ludwig Göransson. And you go, well, yeah, but he's been told to do the Hans Zimmer thing, So it's like it becomes a Christopher Nolan film, but actually that means it's a Christopher Nolan and a Hans Zimmer or a Hans Zimmer substitute comes in and use the same cinematographer and whatnot.
Yeah, because he used Wally Pfister for a while, for a long time. I don't know who did the cinematography on Tenet.
Still haven't perfected the pronunciation there, Hugh.
Off the top of my head, I do not
I don't
know.
But
sorry, how should I pronounce it, Sam? Bloody heck, you know.
we had a long conversation about the pronunciation.
You were the one who said it's pronounced tenet. Tenet or whatever. I thought it was tenant. There's only one N.
Just pronounce it as tenet, and that'll be easier. I mean, Dakota, did you find that Mank basically made you like Citizen Kane the film more, less, or basically didn't affect it?
I think it was, what he was saying, where I think it's, a nice movie to watch, but I don't think it really changes my opinion on it. I think, I think it's pretty easy to sort of separate the two, where I look at them and they're two very distinct ones. Citizen Kane stands on its own, but Mank needs Citizen Kane in order to understand
it. It couldn't stand on its own. I think for me, it made me enjoy it more, especially when he's describing what the film is that he's going to write, when he's again at the party where he throws up from being too drunk. Him describing the film kind of made me appreciate how the film Citizen Kane fit together more. Having only seen it, for the first time recently, and not having much time to stew and digest and go back to it. To really understand the significance of things. And there's some things that sound better when they're described to you than when you just watch the scene. So, for example, when he's with what's his wife? Is it Marion in the Citizen Kane? What's her name? The second wife.
Susan Anthony.
That's right. And
the second wife or his first wife?
Yeah, the second, where she's playing jigsaw puzzles basically. Those scenes are interesting, but I find it more interesting if somebody said, so now all she does all day is play jigsaw puzzles in this big palace, by herself, really. The way it's described, I find somehow more arresting than the film itself.
One thing I did like in Mank, though, was after seeing Citizen Kane for the first time, obviously the other night, and then watching Mank, was the bit when he's talking, when he's doing the interview in Citizen Kane with Jebediah when he's an old man, and he talks about seeing the girl with the parasol on the boat.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, and they recreated that.
Yeah, and if you saw this, if you saw this film 40 years ago or whatever, or 30 years or something, and then you see that, you've been thinking, Fincher's clearly been thinking about that for a long time and wanted to. He wanted to add, or his dad wanted to add that in, which I think is a really nice little thing, I thought, actually.
It was interesting, but what the problem was that it was different to the image that I had of that, because it is only an image painted with words, and then to actually just see it is always going to be let down. It's almost like watching the film
when you watch the
film version of a book.
yeah, it's not how I would have done it.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A question I've got for you, Dakota, is obviously recently you did your David Fincher ranked episode, which I really liked with Joe, and I basically agree with your ordering, although I would put Panic Room slightly higher up. Where I don't know if this was a question, but I'm not the host here, but I'm kind of just for some reason I saw a microphone and thought I was. Where does Mank now rank in your David Fincher?
He's a poet and he's unaware of his ability. Rhyme verses.
Well, I did create. I've got a letterbox list. I'm just pulling that up right now, and I did add Mank to it.
Ooh, I want to guess actually.
Let's see where.
I'm having a guess at this one. So,
I put it 8th. So it's the only ones that are better for me. If you listen to the last episode, my rankings are going to be slightly different than the way it actually shook out. But my bottom 3 are Panic Room, The Game, and then Alien 3 is the worst in my opinion. Mank would be just in front of Panic Room.
Right, I see. So The Game is slightly better than Mank.
No. Number 11 is Alien 3, number 10 is The Game, number 9 is Panic Room.
Sorry, yeah,
I'm
looking at the aggregate list. Yeah, fair enough. So just behind Benjamin Button after that.
Now, I think this is a great segue. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I actually want to just talk some actual David Fincher with you guys as well.
Okay.
Mank, it's Orson Welles.
Of course it is.
I think it's time we talk.
What is it the writer says? Tell the story you know.
Hello, everyone.
make yourself to home, Mr. Mankiewicz, or shall I call you Herman?
Please, call me Mank.
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 This is Herman Mankiewicz, but we're to call him Mank.
Mankiewicz. Herman Mankiewicz, New York playwright and drama critic. Turned humble screenwriter, Mr. Hearst.
This is a business where the buyer gets nothing for his money but a memory. What he bought still belongs to the man who sold it. That's the real magic of the movies.
And now we're back. We sort of ended with a nice little segue of you asking me where it sort of ranks in my David Fincher filmography, where Mank does. And so I'd be interested to kind of hear from both of you, Sam and Hugh, what your overall thoughts on David Fincher as a filmmaker. Do you have any favorites? Do you have any ones that you really don't like? Just sort of, what are your overall impressions of his filmography? So Sam, let's, I guess, start with you.
I'm a big fan. Yeah, I love him. I'm looking at the list now. I think he's got at least 3 films that I would consider genuine, world-class, proper, all-time good films.
And
those would be The Social Network, Fight Club, and Seven, which I put up there. I put up there with any films from the last 25 years, really. I think in the order of Fight Club, followed by Seven, followed by Social Network, probably, but basically Fight Club stands ahead of the others, and then Seven and Social Network I'm basically on a par with. Yeah, I think he's a truly outstanding filmmaker. Zodiac is one of those films that I need to rewatch because I think I liked it, but it was a long time ago, and I think I'd love it if I rewatched it. There's a couple I haven't seen, but yeah, there's a few there that are genuine world class.
And what about you, Hugh?
I would just echo Sam pretty much. Yeah, I really like David Fincher. He has the odd stinker every now and then. He's not perfect. Alien 3 is a good example of that. That's a terrible film.
But I think, Dakota, you made a good point that's kind of not really his film, is it? When you were doing your episode on that.
Yeah, he doesn't consider it one of his own.
It was his first film.
Is it that bad? That's interesting, isn't it?
No, it was just that he fought so much with the studio. Like, they kept trying to change the way it was going, and it was basically a movie by committee.
Yeah.
And then during the editing process, he was actually fired, so he doesn't consider it
the edit is the final, piece of the filmmaking puzzle, isn't it? There are 3 that I haven't seen. Or maybe even 4. I don't think I've seen The Dragon Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I definitely haven't seen
that was the other film I was going to say that's not brilliant. But it's not a bad film, but the Swedish TV version that was made back in like the early or like mid 2000s is a lot better. It's almost a shot.
Yeah, I've never seen the original Swedish one.
It's almost shot for shot.
Is that on your to-do list for remake series, Dakota?
Probably not. Probably because I'm exposing a little bit behind the scenes stuff here, but I found that doing just any random movie pairing wasn't doing as well listenership wise. So now I've been trying to tie them in with a new release. I know I had earlier this year kind of brought up the idea of doing Death on the Nile because that was supposed to come out this year, and have you guys on and tackle those 2 movies. So I'll probably still do that next year if that comes out. You guys are welcome to come on for
anytime
that.
Anytime in the next 18 months when that's out. Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. So now I've tried to pair it up that way where it's about a new release. So earlier this year I did Rebecca, and I also did another one where I'm blanking on what it is, and I'm... Yes, The Invisible Man. Thank you. You know my show far better than I do.
I think I might be your biggest fan, other than maybe Stephanie. But even then, as long as I'm more episodes, I'll be the number 1 fan.
But yeah, in regards to Fincher, I think he's, especially when you pair him with an amazing screenwriter like Aaron Sorkin, like The Social Network's one of my favourite films, and even like his middle of the road, so to speak, films like Gone Girl and Benjamin Button are still really good films. Like I'm of the pro Benjamin Button camp. I really like that film.
Yeah, I like it. I don't love it. If you heard on the last episode, Joe, my guest, he loves that movie, and that was one that was our biggest differences on. He's the type of person where even his bad movies still have a really interesting point of view, and he's actually doing something interesting. Yeah. So I would watch a movie like Alien 3 for all its warts and all over pretty much any other bad movie, because at least it still has a perspective.
Yeah, and Panic Room, you've got very low down on the list. I got a soft spot for that, I think, just because I watched it a lot.
You had it, didn't you, on
I
video?
had it on DVD, yeah. I think it was
DVD.
One of the early DVD, because it's 2002.
I think I watched it at your house.
Quite probably. And I just really like it, and it was in the years gone by that I've gone, oh wow, that's Kristen Stewart, and that's Jared Leto, and that's Forrest Whitaker, actors who when I was 13 or so wasn't really familiar with. I remember finding Kristen Stewart very annoying. But that's kind of the character as well. But yeah, I really like it.
That's what it was, Sam. I mean, I don't know what you two think, but Fight Club very much defined a generation, didn't it? That sort of malaise at the end of the 20th century. Was it the Gen Xers had kind of grown up a little bit, and grunge had kind of died and was out of the window, and it was sort of very much in the mould of, everyone was like, oh, the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Everyone. And like I think you've said a few times, Sam, on our podcast, please watch this, ladies and gentlemen, if you want.
We did do an episode on Gone Girl. You should
Yep. You said that, what people took from that film initially isn't what that film's about.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
That it's only as you get older and you watch it more that you're like, oh yeah, that film's actually about this. But the question I wanted to ask you both was, say maybe Fight Club, and I personally think The Social Network are probably his two best films. Which of those two do you think will stand like the test of time, so to speak? Which one will he be remembered more for? And you can say Seven as well.
I mean, Dakota, I was reassured when you said I think it was you, or I think it was maybe Joe, but I'm pretty sure it was you. In the episode, you said that you hadn't seen Fight Club for a few years. You were a bit reluctant and a bit worried about going back and revisiting it.
Yeah, that was me.
And you still found a lot of joy in it. Does that give you hope that it'll still be iconic in 20 years?
Yeah, and I think the fact that they're so different from each other, because stylistically you could look at maybe something like Fight Club and Seven, and they're both very dark nihilistic movies, so you can kind of see how maybe Fight Club is the one that people will talk about more than it'll be Seven. But Fight Club and The Social Network are both so different from each other that I think there's room for both of them to be remembered. And I would
you've got to pick one. Gun to your head situation, pick one.
It's so tough, because I think for different people it's going to be remembered differently. People joke on the internet where the basic bro filmography is stuff like Fight Club and The Dark Knight and whatever have you, Shawshank Redemption, and those are the only movies that And there's a reason why, they're the most, some of the most famous movies of the last 25, 30 years. And so I think Fight Club really does stand up. But then, you look at what The Social Network is doing and how it's so subversive and, maybe probably one of the greatest all-time scripts. Like, seriously, that Aaron Sorkin script might be one of the best written movies.
Yeah. It might be one of the best written movies ever made, but nobody really talks like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter though.
No,
it's very hyper real, isn't it?
No, yeah, that's the thing.
And again, it's David Fincher. In that case, Sorkin, but also Fincher in his directing, making something incredibly boring really, dramatic. A deposition.
Yeah.
He's gone from writing and contract disputes and depositions and made them really engaging. And I think a benefit for Social Network is, regardless of how good the film is or bad the film is, in 30 years' time, it's going to be the Facebook movie, and Facebook has had a big cultural impact, so that film is connected to the cultural impact that Facebook.
They both caught a zeitgeist, didn't they? I think that's what's important.
Yeah, really well.
Is that he knows how to kind of capture that and to give you an insight maybe into how the world
Did he
operates.
write the screenplay for Fight Club? It's obviously adapted from a novel, but
No, he did. Fincher doesn't write his own movies.
One thing he does do though a lot is he uses an absolute shit ton of CGI, doesn't he? In his films,
in a very subtle way.
But in ridiculously subtle ways that you never notice. Like Zodiac's a great example of that. I was wondering if you guys thought there was any CGI in Mank that you might have noticed or not noticed, just out of curiosity.
I did have it in the back of my mind sometimes.
Well, there's a few moments. There's a few moments where I think it kind of stood out, but I think it was on purpose. And that's the thing where Fincher, when he uses, a lot of CGI in his scenes, it stands out, but it's not like you're watching, a big, Marvel movie where you're like, oh, this isn't real. It just has interesting dreaminess to it. And I think there's a couple scenes where they're driving in cars, and it almost has this sort of rear projection style that they would do in old classic Hollywood movies, where you'd have your character driving in the car, and then the background behind the car is a shifting road. And I feel like he's recreating that using his style of CGI, where it just sort of like looks off just enough that you go,
well, it messes with you,
right,
doesn't it?
But he's clearly doing it to imitate the rear projection
because
style.
It says, it looks like the car's moving, but it's kind of is, but it's kind of not. But here's the set going past it in the opposite direction to give it that sensation of motion. I thought the fire looked CGI for some reason in this film. Maybe that's what fire looks like in black and white.
Interesting.
And I'm guessing the giraffes were CGI as well.
That stood out. That was the only bit that was a little fake for me.
And I don't know what it is, but I think going back to the Fight Club Social Network comparison, I mean, would I be right in saying that Fight Club is on film and Social Network is digital?
Yeah.
It looks a lot smoother, doesn't it? And I think that's almost been the biggest thing for me, that when I think about the benefits of digital cinematography and film, I think of David Fincher actually more than anyone else. With how sort of smooth and
that's true.
I'm clearly not an expert in this, but how smooth Social Network looks, I think that's the main benefit to it.
Now, I kind of want to end up a little bit here with some Zodiac stuff, and I feel like it's the perfect time. I don't know if it just, zeitgeist or what, but word just came out that they solved one of the Zodiac ciphers, and so that's fascinating, considering I just rewatched Zodiac in the last month, and, there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff. They talk about how in the movie, how he purposely misspells words, and in this cipher 3 times he misspells paradise, spelled P-A-R-D-I-C.
Dice, like a slice and dice.
So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean that's almost like the news wanting to capitalize on the fact that Fincher's in the news now. Let's quick release that Zodiac story.
Yeah, it was for me and Sam were talking about it yesterday actually, and last night or this morning I was just browsing on the internet, and I was like, oh, look at this. So I sent him the article link to be like, oh, check this out. It's made news all around the world, hasn't it?
Now, on your show, you guys usually talk about like what your favorite shot or line is. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask.
I didn't write it down.
When I started thinking about what notes to take, I thought, well, obviously I got to get my favorite scene, my favorite line.
Did you write? Have you written yours down? Oh, no, I haven't.
No, I just sort of remarked as soon as there was one that I liked. I stored it in my memory. That's clearly just.
I didn't realise this was going to be a please watch this takeover. I would have actually written those down. Seeing as you seem to know what you seem to have decided what you wanted to say, Sam. Go on. Why don't you go with your favourite scene first?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Although I would say no, I do know my favourite scene actually. So my favourite scene is definitely where he gets drunk at the dinner scene and talks about the film he's going to write, and it's going to be. Basically describes the plot of Citizen Kane. I think that's certainly my favourite scene.
It is a hard scene not to enjoy, is it?
Yeah.
As he goes,
How about you, Dakota?
as he slowly walks around the table.
For Citizen Kane, I think my favorite maybe line, I can't remember it off by heart, but it was the one that he was talking about earlier, where he's telling this story about the girl on the boat with the parasail. And like, I think we all kind of have those sort of moments in our life where, we pass by something or someone in just a blink of an eye, and for some reason it just sort of sticks in our brains, whether it's, a romantic observation or not, where just for some reason it just kind of worms their way in our brain, and we still think about it 10, 20, 30 years later. So I really love that. And as far as Mank, my favorite shot in that was the reveal of Orson Welles, where we see Mank waking up in the hospital bed, and Wells comes in with the cape on, and it's all fuzzy and the camera's spinning around. Fantastic shot.
That is a really good shot. Yeah, it's interesting you say about the moment. In a lot of films, that's where the guy turns to his buddy and says, hey, you see that girl over there? I'm going to marry her someday. And then 10 years later, they've got a white picket fence and 2 kids.
There's my favourite kind of line in Mank is when he's talking to, is it Louis Mayer? Or is it Goldwyn?
Louis Mayer.
Yeah, and
Louis
he's like,
Mayer, yeah.
he's basically, I can't remember. I wish I'd written this down now. But he's like talking about like the movie business, and he's going, it's about emotion, and it's in here, and it's in here, and he grabs his bollocks, and he goes, it's in here as well, which is quite funny.
That is a great scene, actually.
It is, isn't it?
Again, to sort of show the duplicitousness of it, and you're still not sure. Is he just a sincere actor, or does he mean this stuff?
I mean, there's a bit here on IMDb where it's got a quote where he's like, "This is a business where the buyer gets nothing for his money but a memory. What he bought still belongs to the man who sold it. That's the real magic of the movies, and don't let anyone tell you different."
And Mank does have so many great, smart little lines, and Mank himself gets a lot of them, but not many of them are on the IMDb quotes list, so I can't give you any word for word, I'm afraid.
What was the one that he says where when he's talking to Amanda Seyfried, and he goes like, he quotes somebody, and then he gives a bit of his own writing.
It's Don Quixote he's quoting, isn't it? And then he gives his own line.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
So memorable, I memorised it. Yeah,
we just felt nice things and didn't get anything from it other than the
nice
emotions.
memories.
That's fine. So, Hugh, I have to ask you: does this compare a little bit easier now, where usually Sam's the taskmaster and you always putting you up to, mischievous things? Does this feel a little bit calmer and easier?
Does he? The two films you've been on, you were on The Life Aquatic and Before Sun, so you've only seen it where Sam's the one who's the host, not me. That's the host. You should see the pain I put him through.
I love to. I love that.
Yeah,
certainly for the quizzes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, do you want me to put Sam through the paces a little bit? Well, then I have a quiz for you, Sam.
Yes, get in. Let's see if it wasn't one of the scenes that I slept through. Give it.
So, Sam, how much does it cost to see a movie during the time Mank takes place?
I know this.
It's 25 cents.
You're right.
Oh, wow. Yes, I can sleep well tonight.
Question 2. How tall is King Kong?
10 stories.
Yep.
Good question.
Question 3. MGM's slogan in the 50s was "More stars than there are in heaven," but according to Louis B. Mayer, who is the only real star?
I know this.
Oh, Leo the Lion. Sorry, Hugh.
That's fine.
Great question.
What is the name of the rival newspaper to the Inquirer?
Oh, I definitely should know that. I'm going to pass this over to Hugh.
Oh,
who's got a look at his face that says, I don't know that.
The Chronicle.
It is the Chronicle,
yeah.
Because
Because she's reading it. His first wife's reading it at the dinner table, at the breakfast table one morning, as if to go, fuck you. Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
All right, and the last question. Charles Foster Kane's mansion is called Xanadu. What is it named after?
Oh, I know this.
The ABBA song. Yeah, that's
no, you're thinking of Waterloo.
You're thinking of the Olivia Newton-John song, Xanadu.
Oh, that's right. That's what I'm thinking of.
What, physical?
They're basically in the same sort of field. It's a mythological thing.
No, it's not.
I can't remember the specific.
Well, I mean, what's it in reference to? What is William Randolph Hearst's?
Go on, Hugh. I'm going to let you. I'm sweating here.
Well, no, it says. I might be wrong now. You've got me. It's saying that Xanadu was the pleasure palace of Kublai Khan.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Grandson of Genghis Khan. Oh, scary.
Do you guys give up on this one?
Oh, is that wrong? I'm sure that's the answer, isn't it?
Yes. No, the original house that William Randolph Hearst. What's the name of that? I guess I worded
what was the
question.
name of his house? Oh, that's
right.
That's San Simeon.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well done,
yes.
Hugh. Well done. That's great.
There you go. So combined, you went 5 for 5.
I thought it was. I thought at first when they were on about Xanadu in the film, I thought it was a dig at Walt Disney and Disneyland, because it says that Xanadu's in Florida and Disneyland, the first one, was in Florida, or is in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
When was that? Would that have been open already?
Oh, maybe not. It might have not been open. That's a fair point you make. But it is a kind of a strange kind of life imitating art if it is that it was opened after.
Well, I wanna end on a little bit of feedback. I got a message from Callum McNabb, host of Scaretraducing.
I thought you meant feedback on us then. I was like, yeah, boys, you've done okay this episode. Could have done better. Yeah. I mean, I expected more.
No, he's a lovely Scottish podcaster, and he sent me a very nice message saying that he was currently listening to the episode, the Fincher rank list, and he's just over halfway through with Zodiac his favorite. And even though I disagree with his take, I love Joe's points about the lack of resolution for the film. That's why I actually think it works so well. It's the anti-dragon tattoo or anti-spotlight. All this work leads to nothing more than speculation. It's a horror in the truest sense of the word, so for all my disagreements to his views, the fact that Joe says the film still instills real fear is a wonderful point. Zodiac is a horror movie. Rant over. So, Callum, thank you very much for that. That was a great message.
I'll give some feedback on Callum's feedback. Callum, you did a great job, and I agree with you.
I'm going to give some feedback on Sam's feedback, on Callum's feedback. Sam, I think you were pandering there to the audience, to be honest. No, he's in all fairness, Callum makes a very good point about Zodiac. There, it is a film that's. You don't really think of it as a horror film, but it does have horror leanings.
He was actually agreeing with Joe's original point, so Joe's made a point that Callum's agreed with that.
Right, I see.
Presumably, Dakota, do you agree with Callum's point?
I'm in agreement all around. And then Joe from House of Cinema, who was the guest on the last episode, sent me an email saying that he thought Mank was absolutely fantastic and enjoyed it way more than he thought he would, and he probably would squeeze it into his top 5 somewhere for sure. Wow. So that's an interesting take where it's sort of... Yeah, for me, it's bottom third, and so it's interesting that it would be in the top 5 for Joe.
Yeah, but everyone's got an opinion, I guess.
Yeah, but that about wraps it up for here.
Oh, is that it? We're done. Good.
Yes, Sam, Hugh, thank you so much for joining me. What are you working on right now? You know, you just talked about your just released episode, which is
72.
It's your North American listeners will most know it as Pirate Radio, but in the UK it was The Boat That Rocked. So it comes out. It'll be out when this comes out. So we'll see if Hugh liked that, the 2009 Richard Curtis comedy. And then next week I will be for the first time watching. I nearly said Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Then it's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, the Shane Black, Val Kilmer, RDJ.
Great Christmas movie.
Well, that's it. I wanted to watch it last year, but we're going to do one Christmas movie a year. Yeah. Last year was It's a Wonderful Life. Hugh was watching that for the first time, and this year finally going to watch it. I've not seen it yet. I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward to it.
Sam,
I love that movie, so I'm very excited to hear you guys talk about that.
Sam, if people wanted to get us on like social media, where could they find us?
We are good segue. We are at Please Watch Pod. Oh, no, yes, we are. Yes.
Sam, are you sure?
Dakota, when you say what were you working on, my 4th drink. It's a British invasion again. We come in, we swear, we drink, and we snort. So we're mostly on Twitter.
Mostly.
But I think we met Dakota through Reddit, is that right?
I believe so, yeah. You posted asking for guests or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. And you were...
Yeah, and you answered the clarion call, didn't you? Kim.
Certainly did.
Because he's good Canadian, he's so nice, he's like, well, I've got to... He doesn't even like us, he's just like, oh, well, it's just a politeness, isn't it?
But no, it's been so much fun. I am such a big fan of the show, Dakota, and long may it continue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate the both of you coming on. And yes, everyone, please check out, please watch this. It's a fantastic show, and I'm very excited to listen to Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Dakota's point. It is a fantastic show.
I'll give some feedback on that.
It's a fantastic show.
You should tell friends, tell strangers, tell your neighbours. Tell your mailman.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
And this will not be the last time that you are on.
Oh, no.
Fantastic. You didn't ruin it, Hugh. High five.
Yes.
The
podcast high five.
Thanks, Dakota. We look forward
to it.
Yeah,
no, it's been a pleasure.
I hear you're hunting dangerous game.
God bless William Randolph Hearst.
Ready and willing to hunt the great white whale?
Just call me Ahab.
Once again, thank you to Sam and Hugh from Please Watch This for coming on the show. Make sure you check them out. There's going to be links in the show notes where you can follow the show. And, of course, the 2 episodes that I guested on their show as well. So please listen to all of that. Also, thank you so much for listening to the show. If you have your own thoughts on Citizen Kane and Mank, please send me an email, contrazoompod@gmail.com, and I'll read it on a future episode. And please make sure you follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @ContraZoomPod. I want to thank Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. Thank you to Aesthetic Magazine for presenting the show. Please visit ContraZoomPod.com for all your CZP needs and bookmark it, as I'll always be adding lots of cool stuff there over time. And if you can rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts, that will be a huge help. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.